G'day, Steve. Thanks a lot for coming back again onto The Missing Link.
My pleasure.
It's been extremely interesting conversation so far. Last week when we finished off, we were talking about GPS tracking in vehicles there, and I think that the stigma's gone around that. Like, it was there originally. People didn't like getting tracked and seen. Now they don't like having cameras in their face and don't want to get worried about what people are saying about them or listening to what they say and all that sort of thing. But I'm curious, after, pushing all that, to me is all trivial. Mm-hmm. They're all trivial. That's pub talk, because we'd say, go and have a whinge about that in a pub. Let's talk about the real facts when it comes around GPS tracking or satellite tracking. With what you've seen that's happened with the White Line case, what are your thoughts on that, on when it comes to GPS tracking? Do you think it's a good idea to have it in a vehicle? Do you think that it's a safe thing to put into a vehicle? Is it purely just it's got to be managed a certain way? What are your views on what you saw in the White Line case?
Well, it's interesting. It's a really important point, Bruce, and it's interesting since the White Line case, and well before they won the case, and people became aware that they had won it. I started hearing people saying, "Stuff this! I'm going to take it out of my truck. I'm going to get rid of the GPS because the bastards are trying to hang White Line." And I don't want that to happen to me, so I'll take it out. And I viewed that as a retrograde step. And the more I learnt about it during the case and the more the facts became apparent, I started saying fairly quickly to people, and I think it's a big lesson out of all of this. In today's world, there are so many different ways where authorities, if you're doing the wrong thing, have got bits and pieces of information they can put together from drivers' mobile phones, from fuel station dockets, from their own camera system, including their discrete camera systems, all sorts of things. And remember, the biggest risk for any company is the fatality that happens that's caused by a goose in a car doing a dumb thing in front of a truck.
You're right.
Can happen to anyone tomorrow, and 80% roughly of the fatal car truck crashes happen because of the motorist. That's a government figure. Yes. We can't control it. We can only try and watch out for it and guard against it. But if that happens, the authorities will go through everything like a dose of salts, and they will piece together all the little bits of info. So here's the thing for people to think about. If you do not have GPS in your truck, what defence have you got? Good to have some dash cam footage. That might help. But that's not really a help when they're running fatigue management arguments against you. That's good incident help if you've got it right. If you've got no GPS, you've got nothing other than what the authorities are choosing to rely on, and the authorities then fill the gaps with their assumptions, which will often be wrong, as we know from the White Line case and others. The smart move is to have GPS in your truck, but make sure it's high-grade GPS, preferably a certified system. SARTA worked with Chris Koniditsiotis, the former TCA CEO, to put together with funding we got from the ATA, and we invested our own in it as well. We put together a guide that's freely available to the industry. You can find a link on the SARTA website, a guide for the use of telemetry, and it warns people about the need to have high-grade GPS that's certified, because it will then, if you've been doing the right thing, it will prove it. It'll also prove it if you've been doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, and it's a case if you get what you pay for too.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have to invest some money in, because it is a cost.
Yes.
A lot of people say, what's the point? It's a bit like compliance. When things get quiet, fuel costs are going up, they have to fuel them, but they'll be going, we'll stop this compliance bloke coming in, it's costing us too much. And we've seen that happen in patterns time and time again. We thought COVID was going to be the end of us, but we got busier, which I'm still trying to scratch my head on that one. But when they've got a monthly payment they've got to make on certain things there, they like to be able to pull it back. So they do get, if they've got a fleet of 20 trucks and they have providers coming in, they look at those costs and they're like, oh my God, how much is this going to cost us? And they do the math, they think it's too much, but I tell you, it's a game changer for a business.
But what you just said is really important. The guide that I just referred to, we ran a survey of current users of GPS, And that showed up quite a number of things that some telemetry providers need to improve, because there are some shortcomings in some of the systems. And in the biggest problem with some of them is the lack of after-sales service.
Happens everywhere, doesn't it?
It does. So
that could happen with buying a truck too.
Yeah. So all the telemetry providers are great at selling it. Some of them are not so great at backing it up.
Yeah.
Right. So read the guide and have a look and get a good system and use it, because if you've got a good system that's recording everything and you're not looking at it and using it to check that your drivers and everything are getting it right, then you're in more trouble, because it's really good evidence to use against you.
Yes.
So get good stuff to protect yourself, but get off your butt and use it and analyse it properly.
Yeah. You've got to do your homework, don't you?
Yeah.
And a good salesperson will push it across the line to you and make you think you're on the right thing. But we've seen from the first ones that came in and seen them change, and some of them that were up there on a pedestal as being better than everyone else, we've seen them get surpassed very easily.
Yeah.
We've got a bit of a favouritism towards having an app for a phone.
Yep.
Because you need to be able to manage your subcontractors.
Yep.
And you can't manage your subcontractors if they don't have a tablet in the truck. So at least if they've got an app on the phone and they can log in,
Yep.
you can then suddenly be watching them live, and you can do certain things if you're using subbies. And subbies are a massive liability for a company unless they're managed properly.
Yeah.
And they've just got to be managed properly. That's all it boils down to.
Yep.
So there's owner-operators out there, and they need it. If they've got 6 companies they work for and all of them are on an electronic system, to be able to log into that company and let the company see them, it's the onus has gone away.
Yeah.
And that's all that it needs to be. So they've got to look at what suits them, because they've all got their lurks and perks.
Yeah.
And we also found that a lot of them were built around one system originally, and then they added a few others onto it there to make it that little bit better.
Yep.
And the one it was built around was excellent. It might have been built around an allocation system originally. It was an allocations platform, and we better put some maintenance in, and we better put some pre-trip inspections in and that type of thing there. And those maintenance and pre-trip might be loose.
Yeah.
Really loose and just not good enough.
Yep.
So you've really got to do your homework and have a look at them and trial those systems in there.
Yep.
Then others have come up with a great system. Then, good, you've signed it. Okay, now, sorry, it's going to be 12 weeks before we can get you the hardware.
Yeah. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to talk to your telemetry provider and say, look, the reports you're giving me are okay. This one's great, but there's another report I need. I really need it for these management reasons.
Yeah.
The telemetry provider should wake up and say, well, shit, if you need it, I'll bet you other people need it.
That's right.
And they need to work more with industry, because that reporting stuff's really important. And, in the white line case, the key reports didn't even exist, because
there you go.
They weren't designed into that system, because it wasn't a genuine tracking compliance system.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And there are some systems out there that aren't designed for heavy vehicle, but they're a tracking or an asset system or whatever else there.
Yeah.
There's certain ones out there. There's one that the towing companies use, but it just wasn't working for NHVAS. But we've got a tracking system, but it doesn't work, mate.
Yeah.
But that's what the towing mobs tell us we've got to use. Yeah, they might do, and the insurance companies worked on it, but it didn't suit that.
Yep.
And sometimes we hate to tell them that they've got to have a second one to work properly.
Yeah.
But they're getting better and better, all of it now, and we do talk to them
Yep.
and try and get them to change some of their ways. I personally think what it needs to work around is the NHVAS scheme or accreditation.
Yep.
They've got to have, it's got to be auditable when they spit out a report.
Yep.
So that any auditor can read it. Because if everyone's putting their information on it, but then we can't go in and do an audit report off it, it's a waste of time.
Well, GPS systems are really interesting on that point of view. I had to learn how to understand the data that gets printed out in a spreadsheet. And the telemetry provider, Sharon Middleton, said, look, Steve's telling me this all looks like it's in a particular time zone. I need it in this time zone because it's my driver's home base. The telemetry provider, good on them, had a go at modifying, putting an equation in to make an adjustment, but they got it wrong.
Yeah,
I fixed it, right? Because you got to get it right. because your driver is based in Adelaide or Whoop Whoop, you need data that relates to that you don't have to constantly keep converting back, because that's where errors get made all the time. And I reckon SAPOL made a bunch of those errors, right?
Yeah, they probably did too. Tell me just one more thing before we get on to this other topic here, is when it comes to EWDs and paperwork diary, do you have an idea on your members' percentages on who uses each?
I think the bulk of the industry is still using paperwork diary for a couple of reasons. SARTA's been consistently strong on this point, that EWDs will be a fantastic administrative aid to trucking businesses once a couple of things in the law have been fixed.
Right.
The provision in the law that if it ain't 15 minutes, it can't be counted as rest is a problem, because no paperwork diary ever shows a 13-minute rest, does it?
No.
But an electronic work diary will. Now, if you're doing work that is so simple and routine, day after day, EWDs can work really well. If you're doing work that is more variable and drivers maybe in remote areas and maybe they can't get to that rest area, or they get there and there's an issue, whatever, that we've all known, being honest about it, Bruce, that paperwork diaries have an element of untruthful entries in it because of realities on the road.
Yeah.
And it's not the best tool. An EWD will record everything as it happens, and that includes every time a driver in error ends a rest break a minute or two early. Now, they shouldn't, and if they're paying attention, they won't, but it'll spit all of that out, and that all leads to penalties. And our argument is that is pissing about, fining people over minutes.
Yeah.
And as Darryl Foyle used to say, it's the hours that matter, not the minutes.
Yeah.
Right? So if we can have a change in approach, but the trouble is when a bad thing like a fatality happens, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And whatever the evidence shows, and I guarantee you the police will go into court and say, this driver has had 85 breaches recorded in the work diary in the last month or the last 2 months, Your Honour. But they won't say the average length of those breaches was a minute or two.
That's right.
Right? They'll just tell the court 85 breaches, and the court goes, what? And you have to do the work to show that, yes, there were. Oh, and by the way, there were 150 times where the driver rested for 20 minutes, not 15.
That's right.
Swings and roundabouts, Your Honour.
Yeah. And that's where the minute-by-minute thing with the EWD, I think, is good, where if they stop at 2:03,
yes,
they don't have to round it up to 2:15.
Correct, yes.
So they can get away with that. And we have seen guys get knocked off that when they've left, there's a spotter, they might be up a 12-mile, Halfway Creek. It's one or the other where there's a truck stop near there, and the NHVR, the weigh station's not far south of it.
Yep.
And they know that it takes 6 minutes to get from that truck stop to there, and they see you in the truck stop and they say, well, hang on, you didn't leave at that time, you can't make it here in 5 minutes. You've obviously left 4 minutes earlier than what you put down. And they've only warned drivers, in all fairness to the regulator. Most of the inspectors we find are very, very good when it comes to that.
I think that's the difference between the inspectors at the NHVR and some police. Some police would say, beauty, I've got you, I've parked here because I know I'll catch you doing it. But they're pissing about with minutes. But you're right, an EWD solves that problem. You don't, because there's no way in the world you can, using a paperwork diary, actually roll up to every rest area on the hour, quarter hour, half hour or three-quarter.
Yeah.
Not possible, is it?
And talking to, I did a fatigue course just recently, and I had one of the operators was down there, Josh Carter from a very reputable company up there in Newcastle, and he was saying that their EWD, he said they can save up to around half an hour. They can they can gain half an hour a day. Because their EWD is so spot on with the minutes when it's played properly. You're not doing that rounding up for work and rounding back for rest. So he said we actually can gain when it's used right. He said they've been a game changer. He said we didn't think they would be that much of a game changer, but they are. Yeah,
and he's right. I've had operators say that to me too. So there are positives.
Yes.
And
And the warning of the drivers when your brake's due.
That's right.
Yeah, because that can be the hard thing.
Yeah, that's good. And paying attention that you can't start work again until this time.
That's correct.
The trouble is it will spit at you. An officer shows up, they ask you to put it into compliance mode. The driver has to know how to do that and push whatever buttons and hand it over to the cop, and the cop then happily and lazily gets the readout of all the breaches and writes you up. Now, if the tax office comes to your business, they don't have the right to say to you, would you mind showing me each of the instances where you've falsely claimed costs? It's their job.
Right.
So
you're basically throwing yourself under a bus.
Yes. So, and if it was for big stuff like you only had a 4-hour sleep instead of a 7-hour sleep, bad luck, pal. You got to cop it. But when it's pissing about with minutes and not fatigue management, the problem is that under the current wording of the law and even the amended law, that's still an issue. It's about compliance with a rule rather than fatigue management. We want to see that fixed. We think everybody should have EWDs in every truck, but not if it's going to be used to burn people.
You know, I would think probably to try and make it a bit flexible because of those exact situations. If at the end of the 7-day period, they allow you to have X amount of minutes of flexibility.
Yes.
Would work because that way it would stop people. One of the problems will be human nature. Is too many people doing the wrong thing and abusing it. If you give them flexibility, they abuse it. That's why they go down a minute by minute. But if they say, look, we're going to give you 30 minutes on a weekly basis. Where you lose that 30 minutes or gain that 30 minutes is up to you. But we're going to give you that over a 7-day period. I'm just plucking a figure out of the air to allow, if you get in a little bit early and that gets marked, that you've lost 5 minutes there and 3 minutes here and 7 minutes here, as long as you don't go over this by the end of the week. Maybe that would work.
And Sal Petrocito agreed with it. I discussed that same idea with him, slightly different, 7 or 8 times. He agreed, but the Act still says what the Act says. So if shit happens, the Act is going to rule. And for that approach to really work, you need the police to sign up to it. And the police...
Not going to happen, not after we read this either.
No.
So, okay, let's have a talk about this email. Now, I'm watching the clock too. So Steve's actually got an interview he's got to go on to there, so we're just watching the clock to make sure that we don't go over. And... this here is, came to us. Now, this probably was the big catalyst for what was the nail in the coffin for starting this podcast was this email. And this came through, and this was something very critical to the White Line investigation. I appreciate the gentleman who sent it through and did originally want to talk, but didn't because it's affected him. And I can understand why. So I'm going to let you explain this and you can read this out because this just went to show that all the things that you were thinking were true. And we want listeners to really take this with the importance that it's on, but understand that this can be any of you. This isn't just a matter of, White Line got stung. This could be any single operator out there, individual up to someone who's got a 300-truck fleet.
Absolutely. So I think this is quite extraordinary, this email, and it was sent to you, Bruce, as Copy Southbound following that really good podcast that we did about all of this. And it was sent by Darryl Foyle, who's the former senior sergeant of the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Unit, and he sent it, and I've talked with him a number of times. He sent it because he is absolutely frustrated and disappointed with the failures within SAPOL and their shift in attitude, which in his view and mine is a retrograde step where they've walked away from working with the trucking industry in a collaborative way, aimed and focused on improving safety and compliance rather than just running up stats. And it's very, very telling, and it really needs to be aired. And when you read that, he says here in the opening paragraph that after he read a story in Big Rigs about the case and heard a podcast, he couldn't believe that all of the charges against Whiteline had been dropped, which in his word highlighted the extremely unprofessional investigation conducted by SAPOL. And he goes on to say things including this. This email will provide you with some insight into the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group. They're the specialist trucking police unit in South Australia, and the negative impact caused by senior management, primarily at inspector level and above, which I believe resulted in the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group losing all credibility when it came to the heavy vehicle industry. Now, that's pretty damning. He says, I've always strived for quality outcomes and promoted the use of a targeted intelligence-led approach. Darryl and I must have talked about that with his colleagues 100 times in his term, in his years at the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Unit. And because the point is, you can run around and nick people for small BS stuff, like no exhaust stack shield, or a mud flap that's hanging a centimetre too high or a centimetre too low, or an error in a work diary where the date's not on a page, but it's on the page before and it's on the page after, and a monkey can work out that the date for the page that's undated is X. Sure, it's a breach, but intelligent enforcement...
But it shouldn't be an $880 breach.
Correct. And if you focus on pinging people for those sorts of breaches, you've got to ask the question, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to increase safety overall in the industry and make a change? Because the answer is no with that sort of enforcement. And that's the difference in attitude between Darryl Foyle and the way the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group used to work and the way it's worked for the last 5 or 6 years. He makes the point that his commitment and approach saw the South Australian unit be regarded amongst other police departments as the best. He went to a bunch of conferences presenting what they were doing and how they were doing it. And then he asked this big question. So how did the wheels fall off comprehensively over the last 5 years? And he then goes on to say that from about 2010 onwards, priorities shifted more and more to doing something the police always deny, which is chasing stats. They were given benchmarks where they, in relation to number of arrests, reports, infringements, defects, driver tests and all sorts of things, and they had to report monthly and annually to management about these things. Now, every time we've said to the police, your officers have got quotas and they're just racking stats up over all sorts of crap to meet the quotas, aren't they? No, we don't do that. Well, Darryl is saying they do, and as the officer in charge, he was under instructions to go down that path, and it got even worse when, instead of chasing low-hanging fruit, which is how he sees all of that, he started coming under pressure from management. And I find this incredible, to stop wasting his time on the more labour-intensive chain of responsibility investigations, because they consume time and effort. And as Darryl says in this email, you have to do a lot of digging and a lot of work, but you're trying to get to an issue. It could be a company that is knowingly operating in a way that is causing drivers to get pulled up for all sorts of breaches in their work diaries. But the real issue is not those drivers. The real issue is what the company's doing with its schedules, or a customer, or whatever else.
Contract, whatever else, which is all part of COR.
Yeah.
It's all meant to be taken into account.
Yes.
But it sounds like off this that they've just been told, just target the easy ones. Bang, there's the trucking company doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. And he was instructed from inspector level and above to stop wasting his time, because, as Darryl says in this email, you do a COR investigation, you're only going to get 1 or 2 stats out of it, 1 or 2 prosecutions or major infringements. Whereas if you go after the drivers and pick on them over minor errors, particularly the clerical errors in work diaries, which
Yes.
really gets up my nose because it's
You
not
and me
so.
both.
Yeah. So he's making the point that because COR investigations don't produce enough stats, he was under pressure to stop doing that sort of COR work. We in the industry were complaining bitterly to government and industry. You've got this COR law, but you're still picking on the drivers, and maybe you're looking at some companies, but you're not going very far. You're not looking at any customers. You're not really going out and noticing, here's a brand new company, never seen before, and they've gone from 1 truck to 100 trucks in 5 minutes. Okay, there's not that much money in profit in trucking. How are they doing that? Maybe it's kosher, maybe it's not. But you start to notice things or see patterns that's occurring and look into it. Now, he was being told, don't do that. Just go out and ping people. Well,
And Steve, we can all see it.
yeah.
I mean, you've just got to look at social media, and everyone can see it. They all call it out.
Yeah. So he issued a number of improvement notices and secured some good improvements in the companies, and he worked with them. But if you get issued an improvement notice today, by definition, that improvement notice is going to give you 3 months or 6 months or whatever it is to make various improvements, right? And you're going to work with the company to make sure that's happening. But he says in this email that he was told that that's all taking too much time. Sign off on those improvement notices and get out there and go and chase the other infringements, because it was obvious that management, this is his words, was obvious that management saw the improvement notices as a distraction from other duties. Now, that is just insane, absolutely insane. I did my very best, this is Darryl, to lead the heavy vehicle enforcement group down a path of a specialist group that was getting undermined continually by management because they weren't interested really in the main aim of improving safety in the industry. It's clear to me, and I see it also, Bruce, post a roadside blitz. SAPOL, we get a better approach from NHVR. SAPOL will come out and say, for argument's sake, we pulled over 1,000 trucks and we issued 395 defect notices, giving the impression to the media that 40% of the trucks are unroadworthy. They don't say that of the 395 defect notices, 32 of them were serious safety issues like brakes. The rest were all minor technical non-safety crap.
That's right, yeah.
Why did they do that, Bruce? It's because
Makes them look good.
it makes them look good. They're saying we're doing our job on trucking. Now we'll get on with the rest of the shit. I would prefer, and so would Darryl, I think, that they either do it properly, as he was doing until they stopped him, or they get the hell out of the kitchen and just stay out of the way and let the NHVR do the work. Darryl goes on making some points that personally are of acute interest to me, because he was told by his bosses, this was after, you remember the other week we talked about an incident where I had a crack at the police commissioner about needing to keep his mouth shut until he's got the facts. Well, after that, Darryl and his organisation were told to have nothing to do with SARTA, not to meet with us like we were doing every month in an informal, no minutes meeting, confidential, and I never even told the SARTA board what we talked about. But it was a trust system that worked well between me and the police, and we identified issues with some police officers and with some companies, and we worked on it to fix it and improve things. And it was really, really effective. That all stopped because he got instructed to stop meeting with SARTA and me.
It just sounds like sour grapes rather than anything else. And I can't understand why something that seemed to be working so well, to me, it's a great thing for both bodies to be able to have these discussions and work out problems that are happening, and it just was just squashed.
Yes, and Darryl makes it clear that he all he knows is the instruction was coming from the top about not talking with SARTA at all. Sometimes police show up to a meeting that I'm at with the Department of Transport, and perhaps they have to sit there and suffer it because I'm in the same room. But it is just mindless, and I think a very retrograde step. So Darryl goes on to talk about having read, because it's public, he read the transcript from the court case in which a lot of things came out. And Darryl says here, the errors that were made during the investigation by the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group were highlighted in court, and it shows a distinct lack of professionalism and a particular lack of adequate supervision in relation to investigation process and quality control. One of the most basic premises is that he who alleges must also prove, and in the case of a police prosecution, that has to be beyond reasonable doubt. Surely someone of authority could see that the prosecution file was lacking. He's saying that people up the line, if they were doing their job, should have seen that the White Line case was a house of cards.
Wow.
How did it get past vetting? Were there basic errors such as those regarding time zones, the one I mentioned before about the time zone in the middle of Perth and Adelaide? When I was at Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group, we were continually having to take into consideration changes in time zones while conducting investigations. And we had always had ways of providing supportive evidence to corroborate GPS data when we're claiming, that things are wrong and out of whack. So what he's basically saying is SAPOL did not follow in the White Line case proper police professional procedure. And where was the alleged fatigue occurring? Surely they didn't just rely on the 15-minute pre-trip inspection. Now, what he's talking about there is part of the White Line case was the police alleging that White Line and their drivers were not accounting for the pre-trip vehicle check, and it wasn't in the work diaries. If the police had bothered to look through the cyclone fence that they were sitting outside of in their patrol cars, ostensibly watching White Line's depots, they would have seen that those checks are done by the mechanics, not the driver.
Right.
And the trucks nowadays, you get in, you press a button, it does a number of the checks that are needed as well. So the police assumed that the drivers should have this extra 15 or 30 minutes in their diary.
And they did that to save that extra time there for their trip.
Correct.
Yep.
Because the Perth trip does demand to get it done in a way that ensures a driver gets a 48-hour rest break every week. It demands that you basically let the truck driver drive the truck, not load it, not unload it, not do the pre-trip check, all of that.
Makes sense.
You support them, right? So the reality is that Darryl Foyle has laid out in this email a bunch of things that should make the police, in my view, hang their heads in shame. Then he goes on at one point, as you'd know, speaking to Bruce, Steve Shearer is very outspoken, go figure, when it comes to issues which impact SARTA, particularly when it came, as he called it, to nitpicking. I know for a fact that this manner did not sit favourably with some members of SAPOL, and particularly with some in senior management, because I was doubting the work that they were bragging about with their stats, right? Yeah. This came to a head during a debate regarding several incidents involving trucks failing to comply with low gear on the coming down the freeway. There was a call for legislative reform by SARTA. We were saying the law, because they ramped up the fines big time. You touch your foot brake coming down the Southeast Freeway, they'll book you with these massive fines and you'll lose your licence. We were saying wrong. Drivers need to be able to touch the brake occasionally. Somebody jumps in front of them, whatever. or they've got it in the wrong gear and they need to briefly use it to get it under control.
And that's right, because it all depends on how heavy your truck is. Have you driven that truck before on a climb like that or on a hill?
Yeah.
And you might think, golly, I'm half a gear too high.
Yeah.
I've just got to slow it down and pop it back another half, and then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then knock them off.
So we ran a 6-week constant media campaign about that, and it resulted in the then acting police minister, who was also the Attorney General, coming out, and they made an announcement. The way we'll apply the black and white letter law is this. You must engage in the appropriate low gear with your engine brake on, and these are the key words, and not rely on the primary brake as the sole means of slowing the truck. That meant a driver could touch the brakes coming down the freeway.
Fantastic.
Now, we made a lot of noise about that, and we won, but it really pissed off some senior police. And Darryl says here that it's very clear that senior members within SAPOL were of the belief that Steve Shearer was attempting to control the narrative. Hello, it's called representing an industry.
Yeah,
right?
It is. And it's called just stating some facts
Yeah,
and education, because they obviously needed it.
Yeah, and we got the right result. And he says, and we were advised, that's the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group, that we were no longer to attend South Australian law enforcement liaison meetings with me, and were told we were no longer to attend the SARTA annual conference, at which they would come and talk about issues in the industry. The animosity towards SARTA got worse after a head-on collision in which both drivers were killed, and this is what we talked about the other week, Bruce. And it became clear to Darryl and the others that because we'd had the audacity to force a change in the interpretation of the new rule for coming down the freeway to one that was actually safer.
Yeah.
Because if truck drivers said, shit, I'm not going to touch the brake because I'll get a big fine and lose my licence, we'd have major safety issues. We addressed that responsibly and fixed it, but it got some police noses out of joint because they would have been providing alternate advice, and they got overruled by the Attorney General and acting police minister. SAPOL Commission made criticisms about the driving behaviour at the time of the collision, and on behalf of the members, Transport Company Steve Shearer through the media stated the Commissioner should keep his mouth shut until all the facts of the crash were known. It was also scathing of the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group's attendance and dealings with the company on the day. This is, Bruce, I've just been quoting from Darryl's email. The deceased relative of the driver, the relative of the deceased driver was pretty aggressively pursued by police. They charged in there. Their lad was still dead in the truck just hours after the crash, and these people were treated with no humanity at all. And we did have a real crack. So we got up the police's nose.
I did hear that while the owner was racing out to the crash, he passed police going the other way.
Correct.
So I bet they're heading to the depot.
Absolutely. That's absolutely correct.
My goodness.
No problem with the police going there quickly, but recognise that their son just got killed in a crash. Even if you think the company caused it, still show some bloody humanity until you've actually done the work to prove that the company caused it, which wasn't the case anyway. No. So at the end, I think it's really telling. It needs to be noted, this is Darryl Foyle, that 3 of the main people involved in the issue of the prohibition notice have all been promoted. The White Line investigation definitely did not hinder their promotion. On the contrary, the inspector's now a superintendent, the sergeant's now an inspector. And it highlights the main problem for the transport industry. No one appears to have been held accountable for the debacle within SAPOL. What has SAPOL done to improve investigative practices within the Heavy Vehicle Enforcement Group, and what assurances have been made that this level of incompetence will not happen again? The bigger picture, and this is an extraordinary statement, the bigger picture, can police be trusted to use authorities without bias or prejudice? Does there need to be judicial oversight in the use of some of these authorities?
So that brings us to the end of our series with Steve Shearer from SARTA. A fantastic guy, really gotten to know Steve. And what I love is that political background that Steve's got there, and he's actually using it to work with transport and with the industry. There's not many people who are bureaucrats who understand what we're going through, but Steve is very, very open-minded, broad-minded, and has just been terrific when it comes to his attitude towards the transport industry. For Darryl Foyle, mate, reaching out and putting that email together, showing your frustration, probably no different to what those 5 truck drivers did back in 1979 when they blocked Razorback and just felt like they had no choice, because it does get frustrating. And what you've put forward there is probably what a lot of people understand, and a lot of people have thought for a long time when it comes to, quotas, benchmarks, statistics. We all hear about it, and it's always denied, but I think it's pretty obvious that that's what happens, because everything in business is performance-based. So you've got to perform somehow, and you've got to turn around and show that you're performing. So I'm sure that is something that comes out, and that's a reason why. But this has obviously affected you, mate. I appreciate you putting that email forward and bearing your soul the way that you've had, and sharing it with us there to be able to bring to the public to show. What happened with White Line was terrible, and the way that Sharon has come and expressed that to us is purely to educate that it can happen to anybody. And we've got a number of fatalities that we're dealing with at the moment with investigations, and have dealt with in the past. And I think that the bit that concerns me is where we talk about doing what's reasonably practicable, and that's what the law states. What is reasonably practicable? And they'll give you a very broad outline as far as, you have to have a look at the risk, you have to have a look at the consequence, the probability, et cetera, when it comes to the risk, to state what should you do that's reasonably practicable. But the investigations that we have seen just go beyond that. They go beyond what's reasonably practicable. You get a company who has done all that they can and think that they're doing it perfectly, and they've had external audits done and all of that sort of thing, and then they find out when they're getting investigated because one of the drivers has had an incident, or someone has driven into the front of their vehicle and has been killed, someone suicided underneath the front of the truck. Let's be blunt, and that's the sort of thing that can happen. So once that happens and they then get investigated as a result of that, and then they find out, we thought it was reasonably practical, but it's not. Right? A case that we've been involved with some time back was where an incident happened. The driver had some prescription medication in his system, which put him over. Painkillers are a problem because a lot of people who take them don't realise that it can actually put them over if they take too many of them. And so this driver had too much in his system and was involved in a fatality. And the company was prosecuted for not turning around and implementing random drug and alcohol testing. Now, random drug and alcohol testing is exactly that. It's random. It's not mandatory. You don't have to do it. Some companies will do it, some won't. Mining industry does it all the time. A lot of building sites do it. But for transport, when you get an industry that has just got bugger all that they make out of their massive investment in their heavy vehicles and in their systems and everything they've got to do, and with fuel and everything's gone through the cost compliance is through the roof. Everything costs money for them. So there's not a lot in it at the end of the day. So they're going to cut corners where they can. And one of the things, let's say it is random drug and alcohol. So with this particular company didn't do it, but they still got prosecuted because it was available. And they said, well, if you had used it, you would have found the driver had prescription meds in there and he was over, and therefore that accident may not have happened. So we're going to charge you. So where does reasonably practicable draw the line? That's something that I'd really like to know, because it's a difficult situation there to know just where you can do it. You can go and do absolutely everything, but it doesn't mean that it's going to help you. And a lot of people will turn around and say, well, we just can't afford to do that because it's going to send them under. So it all depends on the size of the organisation and how it runs. I feel as though at times the authorities, and when I'm saying the authorities, I'm talking about the regulator mainly, when they're going in for an organisation that's in some sort of a situation there, the investigators are going for a scalp. And that's the way that it seems to us. This is my personal opinion. This is not the opinion of, well, it's my opinion, I suppose. So it's just mine. And this is just what I feel. We've all got our own opinions. So I look at when there's an investigation at times when I see what they're looking for and how, that they won't liaise with the company. And all they will do is come in there and they will just start going in there like a bull at a gate, trying to find what they can find that's out of line. And they don't always get it right. I could guarantee you they don't always get it right, because we've been in and we've proven them wrong. And so it's a bit of an issue. And this comes down to authorities, it comes down to police, it comes down to the NHVR. There's a lot of ex-police working as investigators with the NHVR, which I think is probably a good thing, because they're very thorough. But they don't know when to turn around and say, you know what, the company's done all it can here. Let's just focus on the driver, or let's focus on the operations manager who was doing the dodgy work, or the allocator that wasn't doing it right, or whatever. There's always going to be a weak link somewhere. And if an incident happens, it happens. But why a director of a company is going to have a noose around his neck when something happens out there on the road, and the bigger the company is, the director wouldn't even know the names of the people who were driving the trucks there. So where does that line get drawn? It's hard. We've got a listener who came to us only yesterday, terrific guy who actually known quite well, and he's got impeccable equipment on the road. And he's had a police officer pull him over. He had stopped and was getting a coffee, and the police officer came up and asked if he'd written down a rest break at his work diary, and he said no. And she said, why not? And he said, well, I'm not having a rest break. She said, but you stopped. And he said, well, I'm not sure if I actually had 15 minutes or not. She's going, yeah, but you've actually pulled over. Therefore, you must record a rest break. Now, this is wrong. She's fined him for it. And I just emailed him this morning and said, mate, come back to us, give us the details. I'll fight it for you, because that's wrong. And she said that to him that she's actually educating the other police officers on how to do this. And I said, well, that's not very good, because she's not right. So you've only got to record a rest break when you actually want to take a rest break, when you have to take a rest break, not every single time you pull over. So she's actually wrong on what she said. And you've only got to have an hour's worth of rest breaks during the day. You don't have to record it just because you've stopped. So she's actually wrong, but she actually fined the truck driver. Why does the driver have to go through that? What's the driver going to do? She'll say, if you don't like it, take it to court. How many blokes are going to go to court and risk that, not knowing the ins and outs of it there? For the cost of the fine that he's received, which I don't know how much it was. I'm going to guess if it's a 15-minute break, it may have been a $600-something fine, perhaps. Let's just use that as a figure. Who's going to risk it being double that and taking the time off work and whatever else? So this will go in for a review, and I'll have a letter that will be going with it to say that she's actually wrong, and I'm more than happy to educate them on what they've got to do. If anybody out there has got anything that they want to bring to our attention, preferably anyone that's been involved with an incident or gone through any sort of an investigation for whatever reason, would love you to come to us and share it, because people, this is the only way that they're going to find out what goes on. No one goes on to social media and brags about, hey, I just got knocked off for having a divisible load on the back of my float, and I just got a $164,000 fine because as a result they pulled my permit. No one's going to say that and come out there. They're only going to keep that one to themselves. But we do see that. We have actually seen that case happen. And also they got done for over length because they only had an over mass permit, which got squashed because they had divisible load, but they didn't have their oversized permit, and they had a float on the back with a prime mover. They were 20.6 metres. They got another $63,000 fine for that. So straight to court with those two fines hanging over them. People need to be educated with this, and this is what the missing link's all about. Not to scare anyone. We just want to make them aware. We want to make them understand what they're facing and how they absolutely have to have their ducks in a row when it comes to this compliance work. I'm getting older. I'm not going to be doing it forever. Brendan's younger than me, but I think he just hates doing it. So we're going to get to a point there. We can't get around to everybody, and we want to help and we want to educate. And that's what this is about. And we may get it wrong, but I think you'll find that most of the time with what we've been exposed to after it's our 14th year doing this, so we're sort of getting pretty good at it now, and we've learnt a lot about it there, and we are learning every day, but we want to pass that education on to all of you. So if any truck drivers out there are listening to this and they're going, this is as boring as hell because all I want to hear about is Copy Southbound and the history of trucks, I don't blame you for a start. But secondly, let your company know. let your managers know the company you're working for, because they'll actually learn a lot off this. But hopefully we'll be able to bring a lot of things to drivers to sort of protect drivers as well. There is a lot to discuss. We've got some great people who are going to be coming on here that are going to assist in all sorts of things there. We've got at least one politician who's going to come on and have a chat. And I like them coming on here because that way we can educate them as well and get them on our side. It's a tough industry out there. A lot of people are doing it really hard at the moment. It's a mixed industry now, as we know, when it comes to race and also when it comes to experience. There's a lot of just straight automatic trucks out there and a lot of younger people driving them that aren't really truck nuts. But for us older guys, we were raised in the industry, we became truck nuts, and that's why we stupidly went and drove trucks for a living. So we still believe that it's a fantastic industry. But like anything, the compliance world's changed. What you have to do to comply with it and work in this industry has changed, and you've got to change with it. We can't be a stick in the mud. We can't be a dinosaur. So I want to thank all of you who have been tuning in and watching us here on the Missing Link, and the people who follow Copy Southbound as well. And if there's anything we can help you with, please reach out through our socials and send something through. And if you'd like to come on, and I don't want to sound like I'm being derogatory towards any of our authorities. I'm just stating a fact. But if anybody from the police force would like to come on, any detectives, any sergeants, police minister, head of highway patrol, anyone, I'd love to have a discussion with you. I think that we need to know where we stand. I do feel as though I'd probably feel a lot better knowing that the police force were dealing with the stuff that they should be dealing with, and that is rapists and burglaries and whatever everything else. But also, people that are disobeying road rules, guys out there who are actually on drugs who are driving heavy vehicles there, yeah, by all means, pull them off the road. People out there who are tampering with their speed equipment so that the trucks will do 140 on the pedal, get them off the road. That's breaking the law blatantly. But to turn around and knock someone off because they hadn't recorded a rest break, or to get a damn clerical error and give them an $880 fine for not ticking a box in the top of the work diary is ludicrous. And that's not going to do anything for your Christmas card list. So if you want to come on and discuss that, we'd love to have you on here. We want to get it from both sides, and we want to probably hear some justification from the authorities' ends as to why that happens. But apart from that, thank you for listening. Brendan and I enjoy having you as part of this. They'll be still trying to release one a week, and we have quite a few people lined up to come on here. So all the best, everyone. Thank you for listening to The Missing Link.